House and Senate Tax Conference Committee. This is a big day. He says Republicans are close to a historic legislative victory on tax reform, this ahead of his big pitch on taxes at the White House. And a little more than an hour from now, we've known that he was going to speak on this, and it's coming up. Republican leaders say they are confident they will have a bill on the president's desk before Christmas, fulfilling a key campaign promise for him and for them. Many of them have said that this might come. A Republican, Issa of California, voted against the original tax bill that went through the House. He joins me now from Capitol Hill. So, Congressman Issa, you voted against. Why the first time around, and has anything changed for you?
Well, they've made some changes, Harris. One of them is they are lowering the marginal rate, apparently. They're also looking at, but we haven't gotten word of any compromise on SALT. And then, of course, with wildfires raging in California, trying to get some fairness between a loss from flood, hurricane, and loss from fire. Right now, the loss from fire is not treated the same. So there's a number of items we're waiting to see it. But I think the most important one is the so-called SALT, the question of whether or not you should be taxed on monies that you've already involuntarily given to your state.
All right, so where do you stand on that? You say that there are negotiations going on. Those bills are very different. I mean, the House and Senate saw this very differently. One said that you might be able to chip into that and maybe give some back, $10,000 in a property tax fashion. And the Senate, no, you don't get any of it. So what does a compromise look like at this point? And it's late in the game now, so you've got to have some indication.
Well, any moment we'll find out whether the $10,000 became usable in both, which is what we believe it will be. That if you have high property tax versus, let's say, a renter in a high income tax state, they'd be able to use it for either. It's not a good compromise, but it is a compromise, and it's one that I think the conferees should have done. Did. You know, ultimately, one of the challenges is, at least for Californians, the top tax rate will now be 56%.
Yeah. Well, and in New York City and other areas, too. So then it's incumbent upon lawmakers locally, as they get elected, to be more fiscally responsible. The problem is you can't do that before Christmas. So here is, right, I mean, I'm just plain
true.
speaking.
The other thing is, as you know, Kentucky is a recipient. Mississippi is a recipient of federal dollars. California is already paying more dollars to the federal government than gets back. So is New York and New Jersey. So to a certain extent, all this is going to do is create a situation in which New Yorkers, New Jerseyans, Californians are going to be contributing a lot more money they're never going to see come back to their state.
All right. Senator Schumer says you ought to hit the pause button because of Doug Jones' win in Alabama. Let's watch that.
Today, we Senate Democrats are calling on Mitch McConnell to hit pause on his tax bill and not hold a final vote until Doug Jones is sworn into the Senate. It would be wrong for Senate Republicans to jam through this tax bill without giving the newly elected senator from Alabama the opportunity to cast his vote.
Is he right or wrong?
Well, when it was 60 votes versus 59, when Scott Brown got elected, his tune was different then. Look, that's a partisan policy statement. Ultimately, with the current vote, even without the Alabama seat, we still would be able to pass this bill, assuming no members change. So I think it's more about a political statement, not about the policy he would explore if he were the leader.
Is it a big deal that you guys have reached in conference committee a deal in principle? Because haven't you had that since like January?
You know, it is a big deal. It's a big deal because there were narrow votes in both houses, a dozen House, just one extra vote in the Senate. So to find a compromise between two very different bills is quite an accomplishment. And although I may not vote for the final bill in its current form, I certainly applaud them for finding a way to come to compromise.
Wow. So you still may not vote for it if you can't get the SALT issue and now add in your deductions for wildfire losses.
You know, I feel there's a principle here, and the principle is I don't think that California and other states are being considered properly. I think since our founding of taxes back in income taxes all the way back in the Civil War, the assumption has been that state taxes are taken out before you calculate the earnings for federal. The reality is they could have adjusted, but they didn't. And I think as a matter of principle, I'll stick to my principle that I believe that those should have been deductible. And I'll look for the final compromise. It may be sufficient, but I haven't seen it yet.
All right. Well, I don't know that there are enough of you any longer in the House to hold things up.
Right.
We will see. The real question is there anybody on the Senate side that holds true to what you're saying as well?